I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And welcome to this episode of Rob and Nate Record a Podcast. So today we are going to be discussing the 2003 film Bad Santa.
Bad Santa.
This is one of our Christmas movies. This is part of our December theme month. This month we're going to be doing both of the Bad Santa movies and White Christmas, but White Christmas will come out as a standalone episode. So this episode you're listening to will be the original Bad Santa and then Bad Santa 2.
Yeah, so right now we're about to discuss the original Bad Santa, and we're in a pretty good mood. From what I've heard, we may not be in such a good mood when we talk about Bad Santa 2, but Bad Santa,
I
we'll
almost
talk about
can't.
Bad Santa.
I almost can't believe we're discussing the Bad Santa movies.
Yeah. Hey, that was your choice, man.
Was it mine?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was yours.
I don't. Well, I remember bringing it up as an idea.
Yeah, just because.
I don't know how we actually ended up on it.
It's Christmas and subversive at the same time.
Yeah, this month's going to be an interesting combination with two Bad Santa movies and White Christmas.
Which are two. It's a franchise and a film that tonally there are some slight differences in.
Yeah.
People may pick up on that.
All right, well, so right now we're going to be talking about the original Bad Santa from 2003. Of course, this movie stars Billy Bob Thornton as Willie Stokes, who is a convicted con man, and has partnered up with Marcus, who is played by Tony Cox. And the two of them have teamed up, and they go around at Christmas time. Willie portrays Santa Claus, and they go around to different malls. While they are Santa Claus, they stalk the mall, and then on Christmas Eve, they rob the mall.
Yeah, and Marcus is the elf. He is the little person.
Yes. Marcus is a little person, and that's part of their gig of how they get hired at the different malls, is they have a real-life little person to play an elf. Mm-hmm. And so one of the malls that they hit up in this movie, they take over from an existing Santa because Marcus is the elf. Mm. So there's not really much more to the plot to this. Well, I guess there's a little bit more. Willie is quite the drunk, a terrible Santa, a terrible human being. Mm-hmm. And that is largely what the plot of this movie revolves around.
Largely where the humor comes from, is the incongruity of this
horrible,
grumpy person being Santa Claus.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of plot here. There's a whole lot of gimmick. The only other real plot point would be tied to Lauren Graham's character, Sue. Brett Kelly is the actor, and his name in the movie is Thurman Merman, but in the credits he's credited as the kid. Mm-hmm. So at one point as they go to a new town, Willie meets the kid who comes to sit on his lap and talk to him.
He's an odd, fat child of around 10.
Yeah. And somehow he ends up going home with this kid, realizing, hey, I could stay at this house and probably get away with it because his grandma, is comatose, essentially.
Yeah, his father's played very briefly by Ethan Phillips. There's actually a lot of moderately, names that I would know, at least, in this
John
film
Ritter, Bernie
that
Mac.
have tiny parts in it. And Ethan Phillips plays Thurman Merman's father, and he is in prison for some kind of money laundering.
What are you talking about? He's mountain climbing.
Oh, yeah. He's mountain climbing and having adventures, according to his son.
Yeah.
And so he's left his son in a pretty nice house, in a nice neighborhood. Actually, a rather nice house.
Yeah.
In care of his mother, who's played by an oddly uncredited Cloris Leachman.
Yeah.
Who's basically comatose and highly senile, but will make you sandwiches at the drop of a hat.
Yep.
That's his reoccurring gag.
So Billy Bob Thornton, or Willie, moves in with Thurman Merman, and
basically no objection from the grandmother, who's not fully aware of what's going on.
Yeah. And and he develops a liking for the kid, for Thurman, and that kind of
that is the arc of the film.
Yeah, that's pretty much. And Lauren Graham has the thing for Santa Claus, and so she ends up at the house on numerous occasions, and
she was
also is affiliated with the kid as a result.
Yeah, she was a bartender at a bar where Willie would go to unwind after Santa duties, and they headed off and became kind of an item. It's kind of an odd pairing, even in the world of the film.
Yeah, Lauren Graham, even if she has a thing for Santa, She's not hooking up with Billy Bob
Not with
Thornton.
that Santa, yeah. This film came out in 2003, and I know both of us are a guilty pleasure of ours was Gilmore Girls, which was on the air at this time. And seeing this movie, and it's been years since I've watched Gilmore Girls, you just realize how great she looked in her mid. I mean, she still looks good, but her in her mid-30s, it's just, wow, she was gorgeous.
Yeah, she was. Yeah. But part of me wonders, I mean, she really wasn't that discovered at this time, but...
Well, I'm sure this is a part she took for how different it was from the part that she played on Gilmore Girls.
Yeah, I don't think she'd take this role again today, though.
Yeah, probably not. Well, she's not in the sequel.
Yeah, so what was your first impressions of the first... When was the first time you remember seeing this, and what was your first impression of it?
Well, I remember when it came out. I remember seeing the previews. I remember that John Ritter is in this film, and he plays the manager of the mall. And watching this again, I'm really impressed with John Ritter's performance, because he makes this completely original comic character where he plays this overly polite, does not want to offend anybody, mall manager who lets Willie get away with something that he should have been fired at. He should never have even been hired.
Yeah.
But he should have been instantly fired. And it's a funny performance. It's a totally original comic character, unlike any other comic character I can think of that John Ritter had played in the past. So my memories of this film is it's coming out in conjunction shortly after the death of John Ritter, who was in his early 50s, I think, in late 2003. And that around this, I imagine this was a December release.
Yeah.
But, and, seeing the previews, I had a conception of what the film was. I did not see it until about 3 years ago. It is quite it's its own thing. It's very much its own thing. And it was kind of the film that inaugurated the bad movie cycle. Because you had your bad moms, you had your bad grandpa, you had your various bad peoples.
Yeah.
Comic movies. I haven't really seen any of the others. It's hard to imagine any of them stack up to this.
No, I haven't seen... I really haven't seen any of the others either, but there's a reason I haven't seen them.
Yeah, they don't look that good. This film... the first time I saw it, it took me a little while to get into it. This one, I more or less knew what I was getting into.
The beginning is kind of rough. In fact, watching it again now, I was going... Man, the beginning of this really is pretty rough and pretty gross.
Yeah. It is...
You could probably skip the first 20, 30 minutes and be okay.
It's a very crude movie, obviously. I mean, F-words fly left and right. I mean, it's constant stream.
Well, we also were watching an unrated version.
Yeah.
So I believe that I know there's more F-words in this than in the theatrical release. Mm-hmm. But, I have seen the theatrical release. It's not that different.
Yeah.
There are more F-words. That's the main difference.
Mm. Yeah. There are a lot of really funny lines in this movie, and almost none of them I can repeat.
There's a few that I noted that I could repeat, and only one of them requires me to alter it. When Willie shows up at the kid's house and tells him he's coming to stay with them, he says he got kicked out of the North Pole, and he says... Why? The kid says, why? And Willie replies, I loved a woman that wasn't clean. The kid says, Mrs. Claus? And Willie says, no, her sister.
Yes. Which is a gag to actually return to later on when Thurman assumes that Lauren Graham is Mrs. Claus's sister.
Yeah. Well, and actually he says, that's one of the other lines that I noted was he says, good night, Mrs. Santa's sister.
Yeah. One that I didn't really jot down many of the lines, but one that just made me laugh, so I had to keep returning to it, was there's a period in which Billy Bob Thornton and Marcus go to the mall. The principal mall in this film is set in Arizona, but they travel from state to state. And they're having kind of a little brief quasi-interview with John Ritter in the mall, and... Willie says something inappropriate, and Marcus has to cover for it. And he says, it's a joke, an adult joke, for us adults, which is a summary of what this movie is.
Yes. That's... actually, I don't think it's that same scene, but there's a similar scene where John Ritter's character is trying to fire him. and they turn it around on John Ritter. That scene is pretty funny.
Pretty funny.
You know, they turned around on, you're firing the African American little person
At Christmas
at
time.
Christmas time, you know, and like turning it into a, you know, protest racism scenario.
And he's so not wanting to offend a soul
Yeah.
that he just cannot bring himself to fire this awful Santa.
Much earlier in the film, there's the scene where Willie's going to the bar and he's trying to get Marcus to join him, and they're kind of having that argument. He tells Marcus, he says, "Why don't you go to your it's a Lollipop Guild reference, but I forget what he actually says.
This something like Sucker Society. It's
Yeah.
like it's the
It's the
bleeping
Lollipop-
Lollipop Guild.
The Lollipop Guild, you jerk, you know. And that joke was pretty darn funny.
Yeah, there's a lot of funny jokes in this film. Of course, most of it is crude. It's very profanity laced. I think possibly the best thing about this film is the monologues of Billy Bob Thornton.
Including
These
probably the closing one.
Yeah, monologues that are at the same time kind of prescient and observant.
Yeah. Well, even the monologue, the letter that he writes at the closing of the film from the hospital room to the kid, that's pretty funny.
It's great. And it's dry humor, too. He's got a great delivery. And Billy Bob Thornton is so great in this film. He just looks so haggard. He's constantly drinking. He often has a cigarette. He's not, he's hardly trying to make the beard look convincing on him at all. Just so slovenly.
Has no care for the suit.
Absolutely hates the job.
Yeah. I have a question for you. On some level in your mind, do you not imagine that this is Billy Bob Thornton's, like, natural state?
It does. Kind of like Jeff Bridges in The Big Lebowski, where there's this impression like that's pretty much the guy, right? And yeah, I can kind of see this as a heightened version of who Billy Bob Thornton is. I want to just briefly revisit the cast of this film, which I mentioned earlier. There's a lot of, recognizable names, recognizable actors in bit parts, some of which had not really established themselves yet at the time this film came out. So, of course, we've got Billy Bob Thornton in the lead. We've got Lauren Graham as the love interest. We've got Bernie Mac as the head of security for the Arizona-based mall where most of the film takes place.
Yep.
He also passed away within 5 years of this. I want to say 2008 is when he passed away. So it's kind of interesting to have both John Ritter and Bernie Mac in this. They both passed away at around the same age. Octavia Spencer is very briefly in this. I believe she's playing a prostitute.
I kind of forgot about that.
When Billy Bob Thornton goes back to his apartment and finds somebody raiding it, so he asks the prostitute out front.
There's some inappropriate humor that occurs in that moment as well, but I didn't realize, off the top of my head, I didn't realize that was her.
Yeah, Billy Gardell is in this. He plays Mike on the Mike and Molly sitcom. He plays a security guard. Ethan Phillips, of course, plays Mr. Merman. And we got John Ritter. Very briefly, Alex Bornstein, who's on the series The Marvelous Mrs. Maple, plays a woman taking her child to see Santa. You got Matt Walsh, who's a number of comic actor. More established now than then. He's the neighbor that comes around and asks if they are going to be participating in the luminarium or whatever they call this thing that street does. Where they put and do it all down the street on Christmas Eve.
Would you recommend this movie to your mother?
I would not recommend this movie to my mother or to most people that I know.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I mean it's funny. It's not for all taste is an understatement. If you've seen, you know what you're getting when you go into it, and if you're comfortable with that, it's pretty enjoyable for what it is.
Yeah. Now, on a little bit of a tangent, I have a question for you.
All right.
This is getting a little, I guess, is probably as deep as we're going to get into this movie. The advent calendar that Thurman Merman has. Did you ever have an advent calendar that when you opened the days had the story in them?
No.
I never had one of those either.
I
opened them and you had the chocolate, but I never remember opening a advent calendar and having the Christmas story inside the advent calendar.
And I think sometimes there was a significance to what what shape the chocolate was in, or sometimes there'd be an image behind the chocolate. Yeah. And sometimes I think I've seen ones where they don't even have a chocolate. It's just like an image.
Oh, I haven't seen those. I've only seen the ones that had chocolate in them, but yeah. Yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But that also leads to a gag in the movie where one night Billy Bob Thornton tears the
Yeah, he gets
advent
drunk and
calendar
angry,
apart
tears
and
up
eats
the
the
advent
chocolate,
calendar.
and then the next morning he feels guilty, so he puts it back together and puts whatever he can find around the house inside the advent calendar, including one day has an aspirin inside of it.
Aspirin inside it. And then the first day, because Thurman thinks he's lost the advent calendar, and Willie's like, no, it's over here. So he finds it. It's like, did something happen to this? Like, oh, it's perfectly fine.
Does this look strange to
Does it
you?
look strange
No,
to you?
it looks
No.
totally fine. What are you talking about?
And so he opens the next day, and there's a little candy corn inside.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's a candy corn in this one. They can't all be winners, kid.
Yeah. That's a good line.
One of the funnier gags in the movie.
Yeah.
It's a very successful movie, or moderately successful movie. It cost $23 million to make. It grossed $76 million at the box office. This was back when you still went to rent your movies down at the Blockbuster or the Mom and Pa or wherever. Yeah. And I'm sure this movie did really well on rental.
One question for you. At the very end, the police chief is played by John Bonnell. Do you recognize him?
No, but I tend to recall in the credits, one of the police chiefs was credited as an actual chief or sheriff.
John Bonnell, who plays the police chief, is actually a sheriff who regularly hosts police videos.
Oh, yeah.
So he hosted some shows that were on Fox and things that. In fact, I forget exactly which shows he hosted. But he hosted a number of police shows in real life on TV.
This film was directed by a man named Terry Zwigoff. Not a prolific director by any means. He only has probably about 6 or 7 credits to his name, dating back to the mid to early 80s.
Yeah.
And a couple of them are documentaries. The two that I even really recognized, other than Bad Santa, was a film that came out in 1994 called Crumb, which is a documentary about the underground comics artist R. Crumb. I've not seen this film, but I am aware of it. And then he also directed a movie called Ghost World from 2001. I want to say it has Thora Birch in it. It has Steve Buscemi and Scarlett Johansson. It is based on a comic book, and it looked like most of his filmography had some connection to the world of comics and underground comics, which is interesting. This is not based on a comic. This is an original screenplay by a screenwriting team. They've done a number of other things, none of which really jumped out at me. That's quite the screenplay. To conceive of it, to spend the time writing it, and to think, yeah, we can get somebody to produce this thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's gutsy.
I have a couple items of trivia for you.
All right.
Who would you imagine are some other people that were rumored or that were at one point considered for the role of Willie?
I'm sure they'll be entertaining.
I would like to know if you have any guesses.
To play that part, and to play that part in the early 2000s, well, one that's almost too obvious would be Robin Williams.
And I don't see anything that says he was.
Yeah,
in
but
there.
Wouldn't you kind of like to see the alternate universe version of this movie?
I think Robin Williams in most of his films is too happy.
No, but he could be vulgar.
It would, yeah, he could be plenty vulgar, but I would imagine it would have been something similar to like Death to Smoochie.
And it might seem almost a little too sweet because you go in and you're like, oh, it's Robin Williams, he's going to redeem himself.
Yeah.
You don't come into Bad Santa with the same expectation of Billy Bob
Somebody
Thornton.
who wanted to do it but couldn't because of a commitment to another film, Jack Nicholson.
I want to see that. I want to see that version with Jack Nicholson.
But what was Jack Nicholson? No, Nick, do you recall what Jack Nicholson was doing that prevented him from doing this?
Was it the Adam Sandler?
No, something's got to give.
Something's got to give.
Yeah,
okay.
That was also 2003. Bill Murray actually apparently at one point signed on as Willie, but had to drop out for Lost in Translation.
Lost in Translation also would have been too obvious.
Yeah, you might want to have seen this one. Was Larry David was considered for the role, and
that
one that I would have enjoyed.
Would have been a different movie, but it would have been funny.
Yeah, and the one that I would have enjoyed seeing was Dennis Leary was at one point in mind to play Willie.
That's also one that seems almost too spot on.
Yeah, I think that version would have been just as funny as Billy Bob Thornton. It would have been almost essentially the identical film.
Yeah.
One other little note here. We talked about the amount of vulgarity in this film. The unrated version of this film, which we watched tonight, it furthers the record for the most profanity in a Christmas film, including 170 uses of the F word, 74 uses of the S word, 31 uses of the A word, 10 uses of the B word, and 1 use of the other B word.
This is a really vulgar movie. It doesn't. Maybe I've grown jaded, but it didn't. I knew there was a lot, but I wouldn't have thought there was that many.
Yeah.
It kind of becomes background noise after a certain point. You're right. Early in the film is when it really kind of. Like, whoa, what the heck? Whoa.
Yeah.
And then you get inured to it, and again, this is a film that's a very conditional recommendation for me. If you know what it is going in, and if you're willing to see it, I recommend it. Otherwise, stay away.
So you mentioned Robin Williams. Robin Williams was actually considered for the role of Marcus, the elf.
Marcus the elf. That would have been different.
That probably would have worked. Yeah, I guess that leads us into recommendations and kind of wrapping this episode up. First of all, what would you rate this film?
I would give this 3 stars. I'd probably give it about 7 on that's on the 4-star scale. I'd probably give it 7 on the 10-star.
Really? You're more generous to this than I would. I'd probably give it 2 on the 4-star scale and a 5 on the 10-star scale. It is a guilty pleasure. There are very few people that I can think of off the top of my head whom I would recommend this movie for.
Yeah, indeed.
It's bad. If you don't mind raunchy humor, go check it out. It's funny. You'll certainly laugh at it. The beginning is genuinely disgusting, and there are moments that will gross you out, like the sneeze. Oh, yeah. Gosh. There's moments that will gross you out, but you'll certainly laugh at it. Any other thoughts on this movie?
No, I think Bad Santa speaks for himself.
Yeah. We'll be back shortly with Bad Santa 2.
And we're back. So it's been a week, and there's been a slight change of plans. So our original plan was to do the 2 Bad Santa movies. Rob was under the mistaken impression that he had Bad Santa 2, found out that he did not. When we looked into what it would cost to rent, it was $4. It was $3.99, and we decided, why spend $3.99 on a movie that we're pretty sure is going to be bad, when for free we can watch something we know is bad, or at least something that I knew was bad. Again, this was unplanned. This was kind of last minute. It's slightly topical because it relates in a vague way to a forthcoming theatrical release. But we decided to watch the Star Wars Holiday Special. I had seen it before. I had sworn that I would never see it again. But when I found out Rob had not seen it and was unfamiliar enough with it that I could convince him to watch it, like, yeah, we're going to do this. Because there's some serious humorous potential in this. There's definitely some podcast potential in this.
I wish that Nate's description here did this appropriate justice.
Yeah.
I don't think he's doing enough justice to this scenario when he says that I was unfamiliar enough that he could essentially sucker me.
Yeah, basically I suckered you into it. Though at the same time, I told you point blank, it's like, you're going to regret this. You're going to be like, oh, I wish I spent that $4 so we could watch the Bad Santa 2.
See, but Nate tells me stuff like this sometimes.
Yeah,
and I don't think it's ever been as literal as it is in this instance.
Yeah, so we will get into the many ways in which this is just one of the bizarre footnote disasters of television, poorly conceived, poorly executed, a bizarre curio of the late 1970s, a crossbreed between a popular science fiction franchise and period variety television that should never have been allowed to germinate.
I'm not sure that crossbreed is the appropriate terminology. Yeah, I'd have to find some more negative connotation to appropriately describe
something more negative than crossbreed.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give just the basic, the simplest of backgrounds and what the Star Wars Holiday Special is. So this aired in the United States one time and one time only on broadcast TV on Friday, November the 17th, 1978. It preempted Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk, which I think was a mistake that CBS made in doing this. Presumably somebody at CBS saw this before they put it on TV and greenlit it. I think that person made a mistake. But the Star Wars Holiday Special...
But did anyone at CBS actually watch
watch it? Did they just kind of assume...
Or did they just greenlight it? Because this is bad enough. I'm not sure anybody watched
Yeah,
it.
nobody upstairs, one would hope, bothered to sit through it. So this came out about a year, the year after Star Wars came out. Star Wars was new. It was we didn't fully know what it was yet. It hadn't really grown in to itself, and it was extremely popular. They wanted to bank off that popularity, so a holiday special was commissioned. They farmed this out to a company or to some production people that principally did variety shows, and they managed to bring in Harvey Korman, Art Carney, and B. Arthur into this, who would be appropriate in most 1970s variety programs, but don't seem appropriate fits for Star Wars. There's a loose plot in this about Han trying to get Chewbacca back to his home planet and his family to celebrate Life Day, which is an important Wookiee holiday analogous to Christmas. But basically, it's a lot of little sketches that involve the Wookiee family going to various screens and holograms and watching Acrobats and Diane Carroll and the Jefferson Starship.
I think it's also worth noting that by the end of this film, or TV special, whatever you want to call it, they seem to have forgotten the plot that they established at the beginning of it.
There is a plot to the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Yeah, I mean they do establish somewhat of a plot at the beginning, but at the end,
it's very loose. It's a loose framing device. Yeah.
When we get to the end of the movie, I have specific, or the end of. Are we calling this a TV special? Or
it's
a
movie? A TV special.
Okay, when we get to the end of this TV special, I have specific comments about how they forgot the plot established at the beginning of the special.
Okay. I'm going to let Rob take most of the lead on this one. Again, he came in knowing, I had mentioned it before, but I think it just slid past the brain, past the memory receptors.
Well, he mentioned it, but I think until you have seen this, it doesn't sink in how bad this is.
I would agree with you.
I suspect that someone's going to listen to this and go, these guys can't be right about how bad this is. And they're going to go and watch this. And then they're going to come back and be like, you guys didn't do it justice to describe how bad this is.
That's what I did. I had known about it for probably 20 years. I've been curious about it. I knew it was famously bad. I watched a Red Letter Media broadcast last year where they talked about it, and I'm like, I gotta see the thing. Just as like cred. It's like so you can now say you have seen in its entirety the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Yes, I can.
This is the second time I've seen it, and as I said earlier, I swore I'd never watch it again. But if you have the opportunity to make somebody else watch it, it's kind of worth it.
Is it?
Kind of. I enjoyed it more on second viewing than I did on first viewing, because like you, on first viewing, I'm sitting here looking at the screen with these expressions of bafflement on my face, trying to figure out what it is I'm seeing and why it exists.
So did you only enjoy it better on the second viewing because you could watch those expressions on my face?
Yeah, that helped. And then I knew what I was getting into, which I really didn't the first time, even though I'd heard about it forever and knew it was bad. You're right. You just don't really appreciate the type of bad this is until you sit down and watch it through.
Yeah.
Well, so I guess there's not a lot of expectations because you weren't really familiar with it. But I guess what were your first impressions? What were your thoughts? I know you told me, and we paused it so that we could note the time. About 4 minutes in, you said, "Oh, I've made a mistake."
Yeah, I mean, I had a few thoughts before that. I mean, the opening sequence, I was watching it and I went, "Wow, they actually got Harrison Ford to do a Christmas movie." And now to clarify. This says it's a holiday special. Mm. It aired a little before Thanksgiving in November. So ostensibly, you would expect some form of Christmas special out of this. Mm.
But right? It's Star Wars. So how does this Star Wars intersect with Christmas?
Well, and that's what I wondered going into this. Mm-hmm. To be clear, this doesn't intersect with Christmas. There is no discernible Christmas music. There is a couple of discernible Christian themes towards the end, very lightly. Nate made the comment you could watch this on Arbor Day and it would be appropriate.
Yeah. So it's a holiday special in that Life Day is a holiday in quotation marks.
Yeah.
But Arbor Day is a holiday, so you could call that.
Yeah.
Make an Arbor Day special and call it a holiday special.
So like I said, I was like, wow, they got Harrison Ford to do a Christmas special. Then my next thought was Chewbacca's family looks really cheap, and they have terrible names. Specifically, Chewbacca's father is Itchy. His wife is Mala.
Mala's fine.
And his son is Lumpy.
Yeah, Lumpy's getting picked on.
They're all getting picked on. I mean, Itchy's face is pretty.
He's got a very significant underbite
that comes up like over his nose.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at 4 minutes and 7 seconds into this, I went, okay, I already regret this. I actually made Nate pause the show so that I could see what the timestamp was. 4 minutes and 7 seconds, and I already regretted agreeing to watch this.
This special is an hour and 37 minutes long.
Yeah.
Did it seem that long to you? Did it seem longer?
A little bit of both. I kept waiting for it to be over. Fortunately, I did not look at my watch. So
that helps.
Yeah. All I can say, well, I guess I should throw in the caveat. Watching this made me want to swear a lot, and I'm going to suppress it for the purposes of this podcast.
Indeed.
But in my notes, I swore a lot.
Yeah. It's a frustrating thing.
Yeah.
And you just project yourself back. You're a 10-year-old kid. You loved Star Wars last year. There's going to be a Star Wars holiday special where I'm so excited. What's going to be new stuff? And then you get this watered down variety show.
I've also been rewatching all of the Star Wars movies in preparation for the Star Wars movie coming out later this month. In fact, today I was watching The Force Awakens. While I was working on
you
some
made
stuff
some
in
real
my
progress.
office.
So you've already gone through.
Yeah, I'm down to the last two already.
Down to the last two. Wow.
So I've been watching the real Star Wars movies, and now I might have to take a break because of having watched this special. I'm not sure I can watch any more Star Wars for a couple days. So right after I wrote down my note about having already regretted this and hadn't made Nate pause it, there is bad blanking acting with Chewbacca's family. It's offensively bad acting in the first 10 minutes.
Well, one thing I mentioned is, so 1978, there's a little bit of cable. Chicago has WGN. There's some PBS. There's some other alternatives, but principally you got the three networks. And one of the three networks decided on a Friday night to devote around 15 minutes of screen time to people in ape suits going with
There's
no
more than 15
dialogue,
minutes of that.
no subtitles, no other English, because people come in throughout the course of the special who are speaking English, and then interact like in the Star Wars movie and translate. But you have a surprisingly long period of just.
Yeah, it's bad. Yeah.
Chewbacca's house has some pretty nice shag carpeting.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if that was intended to be shag carpeting or if that's supposed to be some sort of growth on the floor.
Everything in this is really cheap. You were saying when you saw the first little bit, because they were reusing things from Star Wars, so it looked like it had a budget, because Star Wars had a budget. But everything else, I mean, the sets are really simplistic. There's some scenes with Chewie and Han on the Millennium Falcon, and they're in a simplified version of the cockpit. There's a scene later on where where Chewbacca's family is talking to Luke and R2-D2 on this screen, because they're always going from screen to screen to watch these other segments. And it looks like he's in his garage. You know, he's tinkering with something in the garage. It looks vaguely like the shrink ray from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But it emits a lot of dry ice smoke.
Yeah. Yeah, going into this, I knew nothing about it. And so, again, probably 7-8 minutes into it, I was thinking to myself, wow, is the plot of this movie, or this TV special really going to cycle around Chewbacca's family? And it does. So if you didn't like Chewbacca's family in the first few minutes of this special, be prepared for a lot more torture. And then we get treated to the dancing hologram.
Ah, yes. We have a kind of a proto-Circus Olay.
Yeah. Now, I call it a dancing hologram. Is it a dancing hologram, or is it a circus hologram?
Well, there's dancing, but it's Circus Olay.
Primarily like a circus act.
Yeah, you
it's
got
not
jugglers.
Circus Olay. I mean, that implies some level of talent.
No, but you had the two bars.
The uneven bars?
The uneven bars?
That's not in circus.
Yeah, proto, with emphasis on the proto. They're wearing crazy outfits.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad
looked
in this
vaguely
moment
Muppet-like.
that you guys won't be able to see what I'm doing now, but I'm going to make an offensive gesture to Nate for having said that. So usually a show knows what it wants to be.
No, this has no idea what it wants to be.
Yeah, this one doesn't know what it wants. Going into this, I'm pretty sure nobody had any clue what they wanted this to be, and they filmed a bunch of segments, and then afterwards said, well, how are we going to edit this together?
Well, and I looked into this in a little more detail back when I watched this last year, but the people that they approached were variety show people. And you feel like they just signed the paperwork and didn't really know. It's like, oh, they want you to do a holiday special for a popular movie, and the cast will show up, and say, okay, we'll just do a holiday special. And we'll do some skits. And
I'm pretty sure you could make a Star Wars variety special that would actually work. This one doesn't even approach that.
There'd be some real audacity if I'd like J.J. Abrams to attempt to do a new Star Wars holiday special.
Yeah.
Just out of spite.
So next in the sequence of the show, though, they now somehow in their home have set up some form of intergalactic video communication system.
Mm-hmm.
And they communicate with, like you mentioned, they communicate with Luke. They communicate with Leia and C-3PO, which I will mention when we get to the end of the special.
What's interesting, as I said before, they're going from screen to screen. So they have one main screen that they use. There's a screen in the kitchen. There's some other screens and holograms.
But the screen in the kitchen is kind of like a TV screen. And so she watches like a cooking show while she's cooking dinner. And
so this particular screen they used to contact Luke is kind of hidden. It's their secret communication system.
And they have a different screen where they're trying to use like radar or something and track Han and Chewie's ship to see if they're close to home. And they're having trouble finding them, so that's ostensibly why they reach out to Luke and Leia.
Because it has this classic holiday story plot about we got to get back in time. There's planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah, Hans is like, yeah, I'll get you home on time.
Hyperdrives and banthas and unexplained teleportation.
Imperial blockades. Mm-hmm. The show spends a whole bunch of time on the Wookiees right at the very beginning, right?
Yeah.
Like 15 minutes of straight Wookiees, no dialogue. And then they talk to the shopkeeper, or they're using their video system to watch the shop.
So they got this shopkeeper, played by Art Carney, who's probably best remembered as Norton on The Honeymooners back in the 50s. But at the point he made this in 1978 is only 3 years removed from winning the Best Actor Oscar for his role in Harry and Tonto, which is an excellent movie that I highly recommend. This is not on that level. It's not on Harry and Tonto level. It's not on Honeymooners level.
Well, and to be clear, this is also a separate video system than what they used to contact Luke and Leia, because the shopkeeper acknowledges to Imperial forces that he's got a customer who's talking to him through some communication system. And then he proceeds to comment to the Imperial guy that the Wookiees are stupid. So if the Wookiees are stupid, why did we just spend 15-20 minutes watching nothing but stupid Wookiees?
He's trying to play... there's certain... See, it's parallel to the British Empire of imperialism. So the Wookiees are like the native Hawaiians or Africans or whatever. And the imperial people think that they're better than them. And this shopkeeper is playing off of those prejudices.
That's true. But still, if you just spent that much time in a TV special on the creatures, the Wookiees, you don't turn around and call them stupid.
Yeah, and so this shopkeeper is a friend of theirs. He's also part of the resistance, or has loyalties to the resistance.
Yep.
He shows up principally for exposition because none of the Wookiees are capable of providing it.
Yes. So then we transition into a scene where Mala is cooking Bantha surprise. Hence the TV screen we mentioned in the kitchen as she watches... Who did you say was the actor?
It's Harvey Korman in drag doing a variation on Julia Childs.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you want out of your Star Wars special.
Okay.
Exactly.
So she cooks some Bantha surprise. Well, starts to cook it and then sets it aside and really never comes back to it.
Never comes back to it, yeah.
So my next thought, now we're about 25, maybe 30 minutes into this special, and my next thought was, how much footage are they going to recycle? Don't worry, there's still plenty more coming.
More than they should, but not as much as you wish they did.
Well, and they did a terrible job of it. It's worth mentioning, perhaps now at this point, that in the credits, you have James Earl Jones credited as the voice of Darth Vader. Now, anybody who's familiar with the Star Wars movies knows that there's a second actor always credited for Darth Vader, because James Earl Jones was never in the costume. Mm-hmm. There was somebody else who actually did Darth Vader.
Oh, yeah.
I've got the credits on the screen, Nate. Do you see anyone credited as being Darth Vader besides James Earl Jones?
No, I do not.
Because all the scenes that have Darth Vader are recycled, and James Earl Jones just talked over him.
Yeah. Yeah. And James Earl Jones only has maybe maybe three sequences, including the animated segment.
And it's pretty obvious that
he recorded this all in half an hour.
Yeah, and it's obvious that in all of the scenes that Darth Vader's in, whoever's standing next to him, it's really obvious that it's bad dubbing over their parts. I mean, obviously with Darth Vader, you can dub whatever you want over it.
It's a face made for dubbing.
Yeah, but whoever's walking alongside him in the recycled footage, the dubbing's really bad.
Good for James Earl Jones though, because he was able to meet his contractual requirement with minimal effort. And he didn't get to be there uncomfortable like our three principally leads. And he didn't have to sing.
Or appear on screen, period. At this point in the TV special, I actually had the thought, I'm tempted to just watch Red Letter Media to avoid actually talking about this.
Indeed. You should listen to it. They did a
I think I've experienced enough about this show to not necessarily need to see anything else about it.
No, but it's fun to just listen to because it's so bad that in the first episode, they avoid actually talking about the special. They just keep going off on tangents. So that they're just like, crap, we're going to have to film another episode where we talk about the special.
So, do you recall what scene was next after this?
No, refresh me.
I don't know whether we should just go ahead and call this Wookiee erotica.
Yes. So we have Diane Carroll. Diane Carroll passed away in October. She is an Oscar-nominated actress. She is a Golden Globe winner. She is a Tony winner. She was the star of a show called Julia, which ran from 1968 to 1971. It was the first American television show built around an African-American character. And here she plays a fantasy girl VR experience.
Well, I don't know that it's VR experience. I think it's just personal video. Because he rewinds it.
So he's got the Art Carney, the trader, the salesman brings this cartridge and says, "Oh, you're gonna like this," and Itchy puts this helmet over his head that looks kind of like a blow dryer that you'd see at a hair salon, and watches Diane Carroll in a surprisingly skimpy outfit.
For broadcast TV in 1978, it was extremely low cut.
No. Have you ever seen old episodes of Dallas?
No.
All right.
Let me rephrase that. For prime time. I guess Dallas was prime time.
Yeah. But yeah, there's not a lot of cleavage, but it's certainly low cut.
Well, so she has like a shawl that covers at least one breast and most of the cleavage, but the other breast is pretty exposed.
Mm-hmm. But so Grandpa sits in the hairdryer and watches Diane Carroll say affirming things about him.
And at one point, rewinds it repeatedly. I was a little concerned about where that was going when he rewinds it repeatedly to hear the same phrase over and over.
Yeah.
You guys can fill in the blanks on where that's going.
In some ways, this show, this special really predicted the future.
So then my next question was, are they just trying to fill a bunch of contracts, or did they actually sign people for this?
Did Diane Carroll know what she was signing up for?
Or was this, because this would be not that far from the end of the old studio era, and back then TV studios were still signing people to contracts with so many appearances. Did they have a bunch of people who just needed to clear an appearance off of their contract? Or did they actually go out and sign people to appear in this? Because if they did, I feel bad for those people.
Or did they be like, Star Wars was huge last year. I can be on a Star Wars TV thing. That could be good for me. I think I'll sign up.
Did any of these people have any clue what they were getting into?
No, I hope not.
Then there was the Wookiee Ookies.
Wookiee Ookies. The phrase is memorable. It is dropped, but it's not really followed up on.
It's some sort of Wookiee treat.
Yeah, it's something about, have some Wookiee Ookies.
Yeah.
It's like Scooby snacks.
Yeah, I don't know. My next thought was, I'd rather rewatch This Divided State than
me too.
So.
I would, and I've seen Amerigeddon, and Amerigeddon is no good, and I would rather watch Amerigeddon than watch this again.
Yeah. So then the Imperial troops that are inspecting the Wookiee... So then we have a sequence where some Imperial troops come to the Wookiee home to inspect the home and look for Chewbacca, basically.
These are really slow Imperial officers. They spend forever at this home. So we've got...
Well, not only that, very shortly after they get there, one of them is convinced to sit down and watch a really crappy holographic...
Jefferson Starship. You can't even call it a music video.
It's a holographic music video.
Yeah, but it's just they do some kind of things where they smudge some of the colors, but it's just Jefferson Starship singing a decent song.
You thought
But
it was
it's
decent?
I thought it was decent. Yeah, I didn't think it was bad. It's not
Okay.
particularly memorable.
So, but they're supposed to be searching the home, and somehow they have the time to sit down and watch this music
Well,
video.
it's like, oh, the police are here to look for my outlaw family member. Watch these kitten videos on YouTube.
Yeah, but how do they actually get suckered into doing that? Cops don't get suckered into doing that.
Yeah, it didn't take any effort to
You know,
distract.
this is a bit of a tangent, but
Uh-huh.
the best story I've ever heard of a cop taking time to do something like that. This was from back when I was in the police academy, and the instructor at the time that this story actually occurred was the undersheriff of Wasatch County, and they served a warrant on a drug home up in Wasatch County, and he had this one deputy who he describes as having been like 6'6", 350 some odd pounds, black guy, you know, and yeah, just stereotypical. And they're going through the home, and I mean the conditions were terrible. They had to pull the kids out at this point, and all this type of stuff. You know, send them off to foster care while they prosecuted the parents. And this one extremely large deputy, he walks by the bathroom, and the deputy is down on his hands and knees cleaning the toilet. And the undersheriff is like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Cleaning the toilet." The undersheriff's like, "We got better things to do. Get up. You know, you need to come back." And he's like, "No, I'm cleaning the toilet." And the undersheriff now at this point is kind of getting annoyed with him.
Yeah.
And it's like, "No, you need to come do your job." And this big giant cop stands up, walks to the sink, rinses out one of their toothbrushes, and puts it back in the toothbrush holder.
Wow.
That's an appropriate distraction.
That is quite
This was not an appropriate distraction.
I do want to weigh in that I think it's cool that Wasatch County has a position called undersheriff.
Oh, every county has an undersheriff.
It sounds well. Every county in like 15th century England ought to have an undersheriff,
Yeah.
but I don't know about contemporary Utah.
Yeah. No, every sheriff's department has an undersheriff.
I just like the word.
That's like the equivalent of an assistant chief of police.
Yeah, deputy sheriff,
Well, no, deputy is what the actual officers on the streets are. They're deputy sheriffs.
vice sheriff. Under sheriff just is antiquated.
All right, that became quite the tangent. I have other stories I could tell about
Okay.
police stuff, but yeah, from that same guy. But then in our TV special, we hear about the mystical talisman.
So they have this animated sequence that is bizarre. I'd all but stake my foot that it was not animated in the United States. It's just a really odd, inconsistent Morpheus style. In some people think this is the best part of the holiday special,
Oh, it probably is.
and it's also historic in that it is it's really the second piece of Star Wars fiction that really has anything resembling a legitimate story to it, and expands on the existing characters in that world. And it introduced Boba Fett 2 years before he appeared in The Empire Strikes Back, which indicates that this idea had been circulating in George Lucas's brain. And you wonder how it got from there into this little animated segment. Did George Lucas say, a little short story and put this in it? That would probably be the thing I'm most curious about from this special, other than the fact that it was made.
Yeah. It was at this point in the holiday special that it occurred to me that I had not heard anything that was recognizable as holiday music. I wanted to ask you about it, but then I was kind of like, well, how long is this going to go before we see anything recognizable? You don't, period. Next was Life on Tatooine.
Yeah.
Again, I was wondering, did they have an obligation to show so many minutes of recycled footage?
So, I mean, they don't, at a certain point, they stop even trying to be quasi-convincing in the newest screen time moments. For out of nowhere, there's this broadcast that said required
It's
viewing.
an imperial,
It's required
imperial
viewing.
broadcast.
Life on Tatooine. It's horrible there. If you watch this, you'll appreciate your lot in life a lot more. And this
Was that
is
the purpose of it?
That's, I mean, not in those exact words, but basically that is something they say at the beginning of the broadcast. And they also say that it is unscripted and more or less random, which seems like
But it's
really
entirely
bizarre
just recycled
choice.
footage from the first Star Wars
at
movie.
first, yeah. And then later we get some recycled costumes from the first Star Wars movie. And then they move to what's supposed to be the bar from the original movie.
But I've got comments on that first. But,
Okay.
But before we get there, so I wondered if they had an obligation to show so many minutes of recycled footage, and then I wondered, how did they even get permission to use so much recycled footage?
George Lucas signed off on this thing.
They used a lot of recycled footage.
George Lucas regretted signing off on this thing.
Yeah.
There's stories about
George Lucas doesn't talk very much about the Star Wars
no,
movies.
he doesn't.
Period.
He
And
doesn't
so
talk
then
about
he
the
doesn't
special.
talk about this.
No, he's
Well, he
embarrassed
doesn't
by
like
this.
talking about the specials very much at all. There's other people who are involved in the production of the movies who will talk about it quite a bit. In fact, I've listened to podcasts about him, and you just can't get George Lucas to talk about
He's
it.
kind of odd. He's an odd duck.
Yeah. Then we get to the scene at the bar, and it's terrible costumes, and it's a terrible love story. And why was this love story included in the required Imperial viewing?
It's a love story that's just a big setup for a joke. So there's this alien customer that goes to the bar on Tatooine, which now is presided over by B. Arthur, who's just coming off of the successful series Maude. This is pre-Golden Girls. B.
And
Arthur.
her name in the show is Akmina.
Akmina. So Akmina runs this bar. There, Harvey Korman in his third appearance in this. There's one in between the Julia Childs in drag in this one where he plays like a robot man who's breaking down while giving instructions, and somebody thought that was funny. It's not funny, but somebody thought this was funny enough to include. But anyway, there's the gag of this B. Arthur's bar sequence is this alien comes in saying, "Oh, I'm back. I'm so excited to see you again. I'm in love with you. Here's a flower, blah, blah, blah." And the
Because
topper...
you said these 6 words
Because
to
you
me.
said these 6 words to me, which were...
I don't recall for sure.
It was...
Thanks for coming.
Thanks
I'll
for
see you
coming.
next time.
Yeah,
Or I'll
something
see
like
you
that.
again.
Yeah. Just something really generic. And then there's this moment where he's got this expression, "Oh, I misunderstood. You say that to everybody. I thought you loved me."
Well, then she does say it to another customer, and
Yeah.
then he's devastated and confused.
Yeah.
So
It's corny, but it's funny in that it is such bad. It's so bad. Like it's like something from vaudeville.
well, yeah, but why was this required Imperial viewing?
No reason at all.
Like it's
Poor
totally
writing.
pointless. And then there's another Imperial broadcast, and they impose a curfew. The curfew story seems like it was totally lame and 100% pointless. I see no point in the curfew story.
The curfew story was just to provide some kind of context for B. Arthur to sing a song,
Okay.
which also seems like an odd choice. B. Arthur sang. This was a thing that they thought people might like
And it
to
seemed
hear.
like a quasi-Russian song.
It did seem quasi-Russian. It was a little bit like "Those Were the Days, My Friend."
Yeah.
But what was the title of that song? Something,
even know.
my friends.
Yeah, I didn't pay attention to it.
One more time, my friends, because she's giving
'cause
everybody
she's
a
giving
final
one more
round.
Yeah.
And you notice one thing at the end. So when all the aliens are filing out and they got their glasses with them, and it's like, oh, she's letting them all these people steal her glasses.
No,
but
the guy that's the doorman.
like Lurch at the front of the door is gathering
he's
the
grabbing
glasses.
as they walk out. He's taking their glasses and handing them off to somebody.
And what I thought was funny about that was that of all the things that they could make sure to spend a little time to solve possible continuity problems or a nonsensical plot hole, they put the effort to say, "Oh, they didn't steal the glasses. They gathered the glasses before they left."
So then we go back to a scene with Han Solo, and it just has terrible dialogue. I don't remember anything about it, but the dialogue was terrible.
So they've been waiting for Chewie to get back to the Wookiee planet and his family, and he arrives the last minute. Lumpy he needed to use that second Harvey Korman character. There's a video of this Harvey Korman android character instructing him how to fix this little machine. So that the Imperial troopers had gone in and messed up Lumpy's room. He's not happy about that.
Morphian instructor is how it's credited.
The Morphian instructor. So the Imperial guys come in, they mess up Lumpy's room. He's not happy about it. He takes this little computer thing and uses it to send a fake signal to tell the stormtroopers, you need to go back to base. But before they go, the guy in charge of the stormtroopers, so there's the guy in the brown suit, there's 2 stormtroopers, and then a guy in one of those black command suits.
Yeah.
And he tells one of the stormtroopers, you have to stay here because I'm suspicious of this, and there's one Wookiee missing from the manifest for this house. So you stay here until he gets back. And then they leave. And then shortly after, the 3 other Imperial agents leave. Han and Chewie show up. There's a brief scuffle, and the remaining stormtrooper falls over the ledge. Chewbacca's family lives in a matte painting of a big treehouse, kind of like you'd later see on Endor in the third movie.
The dialogue was terrible.
There's some serious problems with this situation, with the killing the trooper. They're going to find that trooper at the bottom of the tree. It's not going to take them very long to find him.
Well, there's water down at the bottom, so maybe not.
So there's going to be an investigation. There's a missing stormtrooper. So somebody's going to ask the people that he was with, why did you guys leave? Well, we got a return to base message.
Oh.
We didn't send a return to base message.
There's a solution at the end of this.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, you obviously haven't considered yet.
Oh, okay.
But we'll get there in just a few minutes because we got to introduce some bad stuff first.
Okay, yeah.
So then they go to their Life Day celebration, and the Wookiees all put on these terrible robes.
Well, first they take these kind of
No,
golden
they put the
eggs.
robes on first.
They do, okay.
Yeah, and it looks like the Wookiees are trying to become monks.
Mm-hmm. And then they hoist up these glowing egg things, and then they transition through cheap 70s special effects to a big line of other Wookiees also wearing robes as they march across the starfield sky to a cavern with about 20 or 30 Wookiees and the other Star Wars characters who have arrived here
now worked
for
here.
some method that they've arrived here.
So Luke is suddenly magically there, and so is C-3PO and Princess Leia.
Yeah.
So this destroys the entire plot of the film.
Uh-huh.
Because if Luke and Leia could have warped there from wherever they were, why were Chewie and Han in such a hurry to get back to his planet, and why couldn't they have just warped there?
And where is this? And who are the other Wookiees that are there? Because there's only 30 Wookiees. There's a lot more Wookiees than that. So is this almost like a word social? It's like we're going with the fellow people.
I think at this point, perhaps CBS realized how bad of a movie they were making, and they didn't authorize any more Wookiee costumes because they were bad. Mm-hmm. I mean, at this point, all they had to authorize was a few robes and some Wookiee heads.
I don't think CBS knew how bad this was.
Yeah.
Until the very
anyways,
last
it destroys the plot of the film, because if they could have warped there, why couldn't Chewie and Han, and why were they in such a rush to get there in the Millennium Falcon that they then had to hide and hoof it to Chewie's house?
So they get there, and the highlight, if you want to call it that, of this sequence is, Carrie Fisher's mother's Debbie Reynolds, and she can sing. Carrie Fisher can sing.
So how much did they pay Carrie Fisher to sing that song?
Not enough. Or too much.
Yeah, I don't know which way to go.
We were commenting about her voice. I think she'd be perfectly adequate as a lead in the church choir. Mm-hmm. But that's the level of competency. She's not horrible.
Well,
it's not painful to listen to her sing, but she's not a great singer.
Well, Nate was making comments on, I made a comment to Nate. I said, well, how much did they pay Carrie Fisher to sing? And he goes, she's Debbie Reynolds' daughter. And I said, yeah, and exactly how many movies have you seen her sing in?
Yeah.
So then Chewie and his family go back to their house, and they're sitting around the table for family dinner, and they hold hands and bow their heads. Was this just, we had, an obligation by CBS to reinforce Christian
The
values?
Waltons were very popular at this time.
Yeah. And
Good night, Lumpy.
That's about
Good
all
night,
I have
Mama.
on this film, or on this TV special.
It's a bizarre thing that exists, and you can watch it.
Yeah, I hope all of you go watch it. Then we can all commiserate on how terrible this was.
Was any of it good?
No.
No.
How would you rate
What's
this?
your highlight?
The cartoon?
The cartoon, which is bizarre.
Yeah. C-3PO has very...
It's very svelte.
effeminate hips in that cartoon.
He does. People's faces are all kinds of weird shapes, and their eyes are huge.
Yep.
Boba Fett's pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Everything else is not.
Yep. How would you rate this?
Can you rate it?
Sure, I did on IMDb.
Oh, did you? Did you give it 1 star?
Exactly.
Wow. That's pretty harsh, man.
On a 10-star scale, I gave that 1 star.
Not even a 2.
Do you know
not even a second star.
Did you see the aggregate rating on this?
No.
On IMDb? It's on the TV. 2.1 stars is the aggregate rating of this on IMDb. And IMDb has a tendency to be fairly generous. Now, this is based on almost 12,000 people who have rated this. So 12,000 people have seen this, and it averages 2.1 stars on IMDb.
I would probably give it, if I were to rate it now, I would probably give it 2 stars. If I were to rate it when I first saw it, I'd have given it the 1 star. Because I was miserable after that first viewing.
There are 87 critic reviews of this.
Sounds like something I don't want to spend my time looking at in any depth. Though it'd probably be worth reading 1 or 2 of them.
I just want to look at what institutions they're with. Yeah, there's not really any that seem to be particularly credible.
I mean, this is... It's got kind of a cult following, and I think that's understandable because it's just such a bizarre thing. And I think if you are at all interested in Star Wars, if you consider yourself something of a Star Wars completist, or if you have a particular fondness for late 1970s variety television, I think you should see the Star Wars Holiday Special.
Or if you're just feeling a little masochistic.
Yeah. Yeah, if you feel like you need to punish yourself, just pull up the Star Wars Holiday Special and consider yourself punished.
All right, well, I'm Rob.
And I'm Nate.
And this is Rob and Nate Record a Podcast.